Everybody, welcome back to the Playtest panel. This is Andrew, and here's Nathan and Blake. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good, thank
You
you.
pointed to us, but now we have to
Oh,
make sure in the edit
oh
that's good. But
no.
you know what? It'll be okay. I have a template. But yeah, I'm doing fine. Blake, how are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Very tired, but I'm making progress on the game, so I can't complain too much.
Complaining about being tired. We'll get into that later. How's the progress going? Because I know, well, you've been showing us off the episodes as well how it's going. Last time you showed me the crossbow that you added. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And it just some like the new level as well you've got as well. Shipyard. What are you calling it?
It's called Cargo Yard currently
Cargo
in the
yard. Yeah,
game.
that's right.
Yes. Yeah. So that level took me about a week to make. I think. It's not like 100% done. I've still got to touch up some art and various layout stuff, but I do have, a second fully playable level in the game now, and I've just, as of today, started on the third map, which is a motel floor. I think that should be pretty fun. Very, very, very seedy motel, so I think it should fit
Right.
the vibe of the game pretty well.
Like a very
Um,
US style motel. Like
yeah, for sure.
the one I'm thinking of. Yep.
Probably not like maybe not the outdoor one that you might be thinking of. I'm sort of like,
Well, yeah, I'm
like
guessing you'd still be like inside
yeah,
doing stuff.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, basically what you're thinking is essentially what I've just started grey boxing. I've also I've been changing up the flow of the game a bit and just how things work. The three of us recently went to a online game dev meetup earlier in the week, and I was sort of like showing people, yeah, how I had changed how the game was working, and just was trying to get people's feedback on what they think the best direction I should be taking it. So at the moment, it's sort of become a bit more of a not a wave-based shooter, but an arena shooter, which is not necessarily what I started out wanting to do. But just for the time, it's a lot quicker than manually placing all of the enemies and that sort of stuff. So I'm just experimenting at the moment, and I'm going to see, where it ends up.
Andrew, what have you been doing? Have you dropped Soul Seeker? Have you been working on other things?
What have I done last week? So last week, I released a video, and I've been working on a few things. It's been really busy. My contract's coming into an end. So I've been working a lot at my day job, which is a contract 3D environment artist, and then I haven't really been working on Soul Seeker as much because I've had to jump onto another project that will be shown off at GamesPon next week, and I gotta frantically rush at it because I've really kind of done very little on it. So I've got a week of crunch to go. So I'm gonna have to put Soul Seeker on the side, have to put the devlog on the side, and kind of rush at that for a bit. Yeah. What about you, Nathan?
Um, well, I haven't been able to do much. With like you guys, I was showing off some of the stuff I had been doing the week before, I think, at the online meetup, which was really fun. And one thing I was going to say, Blake, is one thing I like about meetups like that is when you have different people you've never spoken to before and they give different feedback. And I'm like, oh, okay. Isn't the same, like, because, you show the game to some of the same people and they're also the same thing. But when you have different people who have different tastes of things, kind of what they want to see in the game is interesting to hear. So one thing that I had was people were saying that to slow the game down, they wanted to interact more with customers. So make sure that they're happy, kind of have more of that service aspect to it, which I was like, okay, I've heard that a long time ago previously, but kind of revisiting that in a way of thinking of like, okay, how could I implement something like that to slow down the gameplay? One thing I started doing last night, just because I don't know, I was in the mood and I was like, okay, let's bite this bullet. I was in a very weird mood last night. I think, very annoyed that like I wasn't where I wanted to be right now in terms of my skill level. Like I've been trying to learn a whole bunch of programming languages and theory and stuff. And like on the ride home on the train, I was just reading C++ books and like documentations, trying to like soak it all in. And it doesn't always all soak in at once, and so there was just this like frustration and confusion. And I was like, I just go learn Unreal and C++ and bite the bullet. And so last night I got a bit of my blueprint code and turned it into a C++ node, which is the first steps of going full C++. Like, you still use blueprints to like connect logic and stuff, but it means that a lot of the things, because what you can do in Unreal with blueprints is when you have like a whole bunch of blueprints, you can compress them either into a macro or like collapse them, so it's a single thing. But what I ended up doing was I got one of those and then made C++ classes and made the logic. And then so instead of having that kind of collapsed node group, it was just a little blueprint node that was now all C++, which technically people say is faster. I mean, I could maybe show you how much I did, but it basically took 3 to 4 scripts for this bit of logic and like maybe an hour or two doing this. But this was just like one little node on a tree of like heaps of nodes. All it did was it was part of the reset function I have. So when you have a table in my cafe game, it's in different states, whether it's like full, empty, clean, or whatever. And so this is when you clear a table and it technically cleans itself. It's logic to make sure like everything's tagged and reset properly. And so that was the one node I did. And it wasn't as scary as I thought. I think part of that was because I had ChatGPT explaining stuff to me. So I also, the writer editor is scarily good at auto completion. Half the time I would start writing something and it just already knew.
How does Rider work?
Well, it's just like Visual Studio.
Yeah.
But it's made better for Unreal. So it just has better syntax and IntelliSense for
So is it
Unreal.
different to how Claude works? Like, I haven't used any of that sort of stuff. But
It's just it doesn't have any. I wasn't using any AI stuff, as I'm aware. Like, I thought it was just all regular IntelliSense. Like, when you'd start typing like in Unity and C# of like image, and then you'd like do dot, and then it kind of start auto completing it. But this was like, I was actually kind of skeptical. I was like, is this AI? I don't think it is, but it's giving me whole lines of stuff that like ChatGPT is telling me. But then, make a mistake in a few areas. But okay, it's not so self-aware that it knows exactly what I want. It's just giving me kind of the full like line of code. But yeah, it's very much the same as Visual Studio. It's just a bit faster, and it works better in Unreal just out of the box. It's a lot easier to set up. So the way that Unity and like either VS Code or Visual Studio works is very different to how you would program in Unreal and Rider. So the way that it works in Unreal is that you actually, so instead of opening Unreal first, you open Rider and you open your project, your solution file. And so it will show like all your scripts and stuff. And then you actually compile the engine through Rider. And so it launches the engine that way.
Right.
And so when you make changes to the code, you then have to like hot reload it, or rebuild, so to speak, stuff. So that's something that's always scared me, because I'm like, if you make a big mistake, which is a lot easier to do in C++ if you don't know what you're doing, which I don't know yet completely what I'm doing, you can crash the engine. And so, and at least the way that I work is a spastic. So, I'll start doing some scripting, and then I'll go implementing some modeling, and then this and that. And then like, I'll go back and do some code, like, I go back and forth between what's needing to be done. And in the past, when I've done other like test projects or prototypes, I've crashed the engine while doing some scripting stuff because I don't know how to script in C++ yet. Like, I'm still learning. And then the whole thing crashes and doesn't save my work. And so
Lovely.
That's what's always been holding me back. But now I've kind of learned the better ways of working. And so no crashes yet. It was just really not demotivated. I just know there's still a lot of work ahead of me, I guess. I've redone the character model the other night, which I showed you guys as well. And I was so happy because I showed, and the first thing Andrew said was, "Wow, that looks so much better." And I was like, "Yes, okay, that was a good choice. That was a good choice." Because other times I haven't got reaction from anybody about my old character models, but that one I was like, "Yeah, it's a chibi character." So I was like, "Okay, we're going in that direction." But yeah, I made this one little node with 3 or 4 C++ scripts, and then I look at my whole blueprint of like the table actor, and there's going to be at least like 200 nodes connected to each other. So I just did one and was like, oh, I have to do so much more work. But it's like I if I want a job in the games industry doing Unreal senior C++ stuff, like I have to know how to do this. So I'm just, and it's a lot easier to do when you've already got the blueprints versus doing it from scratch. Because the logic is basically all there. It's just me making sure that I'm passing all the right information through correctly, which, yeah. So that was me last night. And then, yeah, Coco Loco's just, it's made a lot of progress, I think. Like when I do show it off, I think I've been tossing up doing another devlog video. And compared to the last one, like a lot has been changed and updated. So it's definitely made a lot of progress. I just want to I have to wait till uni break, I think, and then I'm going to hit the ground running and just try and get as many updates and things added. And you know, I just want to work on my game, but you know, other things always affect me and make it harder to work on it because then you're tired and don't have brain power. But because I was working on that, I remember I sat down at like 10:30, and then I was on it until maybe like 10 to 1 in the morning and was so tired. And if I wasn't working on that, like if I was doing any chore in the house, I would have gone to sleep like 2 hours before. But because it's, you know, making games, I was just like, you know, my eyes were bloodshot red, and I was like, I just need to learn this. This is what I need. But yeah, that's been my tiny little bit of work.
Very technical stuff.
How do you find that C++ in Unreal compares to C# in Unity? Like, is there like many similarities, or like how does it feel different?
Yes. So I think, and especially as someone now who, like, in my current studies at university, we're actually using C# by itself to make stuff. And that I'm finding an absolute breeze. And if anything, because I've been using C# Unity for so long, I'm actually, certain terms and things I did in Unity just because, like, that's how it's done. Now I'm like, oh, okay, I fully comprehend now what it means to do, like, certain things, which has been good. And I think, like, C# in Unity is definitely easier, and there's a lot of things it does that you just don't need to worry about. And even doing things like mono-develop, like, you know, how you have the start of each script and most of it's through mono-develop and stuff. Like, there's just a lot of things that are taken care of for you. I think Unreal and C++, it isn't complicated. It's pretty similar. There's just a few extra steps in terms of how memory is allocated and working in the game, which has two things, right? If you don't know what you're doing, it's easier to break. But if you do know what you're doing, it's so much better to, like, performance-wise, to know how to program and stuff. Because for me, like, the biggest thing that I struggle with, and this is the thing too, like, I'm working on a C++ thing that's just by itself, and I for some reason I find that easier to work in than in Unreal, just because Unreal also has their particular flavors or like extra functions that they use. Like, for example, if you want to connect something into a node, you have to write certain properties or functions. Even just writing a script in Unreal, you have to say whether or not, like, it's blueprint accessible or it's like a runtime thing. Like, you got to, like, really tell what it is. You can't just make a script and that be it, because of just the way it works in the engine. But for me, one of the things I'm trying to get my head around properly, aside from pointers, which, you know, I think everyone struggles with, pointers, garbage collection, are header files. So in C++, what you do is you have a header file which I mean, you know what? I'm scared to even give definitions because I feel like I'm going to get it wrong. But it's an extra file that helps the compiler know what the script it's about to read is. So in C Sharp, when you write a script and you say, these are the variables I want, C Sharp and when I'm developing that, they do all the complicated stuff of putting those integers into the memory you need, and then also what that integer actually is. So in a computer, and again, we're going to get super technical, so sit down, but you just open a can of worms. It's revision for me. So when you program, for example, Blake, give me an example of a variable you use in one of your scripts.
Like a transform or something like that.
Yeah, okay. So you have a transform for like a weapon position.
The player.
For the
player's
player,
position.
okay.
Yeah.
So when you script, or in your computer, the first thing you do is you say to it, hey, save some memory for this concept of a transform. So it has to know, okay, in memory somewhere, there's a transform. But then the second thing you need to tell it is, hey, the value of transform is in this other place of memory. And so when you, for example, in your scripts, when you're like, okay, add this value to transform, what it does, it goes to the first position of memory to say, this is transform, but it doesn't actually know the value of transform, it just knows like transform exists. And so what a pointer does is it points to the actual value of transform, if that makes sense.
Sort of, yeah.
Sort of, yeah. And so a lot of C++ and just like programming in general now that I've been doing is knowing how that works. And so what happens sometimes is sometimes you'll declare transform and then you'll tell a script, hey, go do this with transform. And then the compiler says, well, I don't know what that even is. What is transform? And so there's lots of like computer science stuff of knowing where it is in memory. And like, you know, the other thing too, right, in games and stuff and in RAM and everything, like we know this, sometimes things are instantiated, sometimes things are destroyed, and sometimes your RAM gets too much because you're not destroying the things that are no longer important. Like, you know, if you have enemy NPCs and you kill one of them, you shouldn't, you know, store their health anymore because it's not relevant. And so C++, there's more things involved in regards to that because while C# will automatically, in most times, in most instances, like say, okay, you've got an integer, here's the value, like you don't need to worry about any of that. In C++, you have to worry about it existing, finding its value, and then also getting rid of it when you're actually finished with it. And that's just like variables. Then there's function logic and all this other stuff that I have. There's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. I'm just like, yeah. It's funny. I don't know if you guys have ever been like this, but maybe you have when you've got like deadlines and stuff for school where you're trying to learn as much as you can and you can literally feel yourself not learning. Like you're like trying to like shovel in all the information and you're like, it's just not going in. I'm trying my hardest and it's just not going in.
I mean, I think the best way, I mean, for me, but it's just for me, it's just a me thing. But in my opinion, I think the best way people learn is by absorbing information, even if it doesn't really stick, but then encountering that situation, be like, wait a second, I do know this. So then, and it comes back, right? So like a lot of things I learned in uni, I was like, when I was doing the like sort of game dev course, and we had this like sort of like first 2 weeks was just like you had to study up for this like little quiz, and it's like, what's an integer? I was like, what the fuck is an integer? And then so I still just memorized it for a thing, but and I start using Unity, and I'm like, wait, an integer is like a full number. Wait a second, I knew this because I learned it from this quiz. So I think, you know, it does feel like you're learning nothing, but until you like encounter the situation where you have to sort of use that, I feel like it's going to come to you.
Yeah, and that's the annoying thing I'm finding with studying is that some of the scenarios they give us for you to encounter it are so abstract and like, yeah, abstract's the best way to put it. Of like, I can't learn this because what do you mean? Like, in what scenario is this relevant? And they just say, right now in this example, I'm like, yeah, but what if, like, especially doing networking switching, I hate it so much. Like, if Anyways, that's a whole other comment. But like, you're right. Like, and when I do reviews for things, I'm usually like, oh yeah, I know what that is. But if, like, for example, I've got my notes up here for my object-oriented programming. There's things like association, aggregation, dependence, the memory stack and the heap, and what's the difference between the two. Reference types and value types, and pointers and types, and all this other stuff. And when I read it, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But when you test me on it, I get confused and I forget. I had a lab yesterday for my cloud computing course, and we have interviews for all this stuff. Like, you do the work and then you get interviewed by the tutor, the lab tutor. And it was so funny because I was going really good. And then this last question she asked me, she goes, but how do they have access to each other? And I'm in AWS, the Amazon, web services, and I've got this like tab on the left of all these different things. And I'm like, I used and she's like, down a bit, up, no, yeah, it's around there. And I'm like, she's giving me all these hints. And then I eventually say the thing. She goes, good job. Yes, it's routing. Yeah, you did it. I'm like, oh, there's just too much. I gotta get to a head. Anyways, so, yeah, I don't think it's funny. I don't think I've ever worked as hard as I ever have mentally than I am right now. And I've tried to learn a language, and I think learning a language is hard. And I learned Hungarian, and that's probably that's up there for hard languages. But I think with that one, it was less about remembering and learning things, and I think more about the fatigue, like the physical fatigue of learning a language. Because with languages, at least, like, people know how to speak. You want to communicate. Like, a lot of the things you say can be used, like you're saying, Andrew. Like, you understand when certain words need to be said if you learned them. It's more of just retraining your brain on how to think, and I mean, there's actually, never mind. That was pretty hard to do when you think about it.
I think quizzes at the end of the day and like tests are such a bad way of conveying information, or like testing it, even just testing information, right? Because like test, this is just memorize, and then like try to repeat the information. I know like that format is slowly going away, very, very slowly, but I think in general, all forms of learning, I mean, even like, I don't know, it's just like everywhere is I think the world has to start like evolving, because especially with like newer people and younger generations gonna have a much more difficult time with this kind of study. Like, I mean, it just like, I feel like this sort of form of learning has just got to evolve, and it seems to be slowly, but it's not as good, right?
Mm-hmm. I also think, especially in terms of like games and software and stuff, you definitely need different ways of working. I think that, like, I know some people who they just struggle so much with some of these things. And the annoying thing is, especially this is in my personal experience, is that people who are meant to teach you won't teach you because they say you need to learn it yourself and figure it out yourself. And so it's like, why the heck am I paying you $16,000 to teach me something you're going to tell me to teach myself? And they struggle, and they get confused, and they get annoyed. And I do too sometimes, because I'm like, I'll work in a whole thing and be like, okay, I'm stuck at this point. And then they'll go and say, well, what do you think will work? And I'm like, I don't know. That's why I came to you. I reckon in a lot of the industries we work in, it makes me so sad. Like, my dad, when he started work, he showed me the first letter he got from his full-time job. Basically, it was an interview to see how good of a person he was and whether the boss could, build him up. And the letter he got, which was like a handwritten typewriter letter, was like, yes, it was a great meeting you. I look forward to your first day. And he basically got trained from the ground up, but it was all practical. He was a piano tuner. So he went out to places and tuned pianos and did training. Like, he still went to school, so to speak, but the work paid for it. And his experience is all very practical. And he had senior people who would teach him things. And I think that's the biggest thing missing from people like us right now, is that you aren't having as much mentorship. There is not enough mentorship that happens in the games industry, especially where we are. But I also think it's because there's been such a big influx of junior and unexperienced people. It's so much harder now to even get into that role. And I also think that a lot of people are just leaving the industry as well. But like I agree, Andrew. I think something needs to change. And in my mind, I think that's the best way to learn and to train people is to just have mentorship, like have a project, have a mentor, and just work on that together. I think that's the best way to learn, in my experience. But we obviously don't see that happen much at all.
How do you learn, Blake? So I know you didn't really go to uni or any thing like that for games. So how did you like get through your first initial sort of like point of learning when starting out with uni?
Yeah, well, I didn't really even meet any other developers up until about maybe just over 2 years ago. Um, so yeah, basically before that, I had no real contact with like anyone in person that did anything like this. So basically, it was just me wanting to make something and coming up against some sort of issue, and just being like, well, I guess I just have to Google until I figure out how to get this thing working and just experiment. And I feel like all of my game dev knowledge has basically just come from like the problems I've encountered and the things I've needed to get working and not knowing how to do them. Like I'm sure there's like probably some decent sized gaps in my ability for things that might even be like pretty basic stuff, but they're just things I've never had to deal with, so I've never needed to learn them. But yeah, I think my whole process has really just come down from having something I've needed to overcome and just doing what I had to get there. But I also feel like since I have met other game developers, maybe not so much on the development side of things, but on everything else, like the business side of stuff and just knowing what opportunities are out there, that has always just come from finding mentors and just talking to people. So yeah, I think it really just yeah, mostly just Google. I say my answer to that question is mostly just Google. Just if there's a problem, just search until I figure out how to overcome it.
So I'm curious because like I often because I'm not really a programmer like you guys, but I often come across some issue or something in Unreal, and I'll search up the solution, and I'll be like, I don't understand the solution, but I'll put it in, and it'll end up working. But then it takes me a few more times, and like I encounter the same thing. Like, wait, if I just use this, try using it again and again and again, eventually, like for example, like I did not know what for each loop was at all when I first like started. I was like, what? Why do I need to use this? I can't I just branch. But and then now I love I use it for each loop whenever I get my chance to, So like I'm curious, like, do you guys ever like run into an issue, you search it up, you still don't really understand what it is, but you kind of put it in anyways, and then you've eventually sort of like understood it after a amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of times where I've just kind of like brute forced like a problem, and it's taken me maybe like years after that point that I figured out, oh, maybe I should have just used a for loop for that instead of like checking against like every variable and things like that. Like you know, I feel like a lot of programmers do that in the early days where you don't know the correct way to do something, so you do the first thing that works. And it's just one of those things that takes time, and as you improve as a programmer, you're gonna learn what the more correct ways of doing things are. But I mean, I feel like there's stuff I even do now that is basically like not the best programming practices, but it does work. And at the end of the day, when I'm a solo indie, if that's what it takes, that's what I'll do.
I mean, sometimes there are solutions that you're not even aware of. So you do something, um, and and you're not really aware of the fact that there is a solution for that, or there is an alternative way that is the proper way, or quote unquote the proper way, right? You know, but until you encounter it, or someone, mentions it or something, but and then by that time you've already, like, it's too late to fix, right? But yeah, I guess, that's one of the things about programming and game engines and developing in general. It's just so much knowledge that there's still yet to discover, that it's so hard to ever really feel like you're a master, right?
It's
Yep.
funny. I mean, there's so many things have been said now. There's definitely things where I've like not understood and then learned and then used those things. For me, in Unreal, it was using interfaces, which once I learned how to do, I think I kind of overdid it. And so now I'm going through being like, okay, do I really need to use this in this scenario? But I had an interesting experience this week in my computer programming class where what they do is we have a given homework basically, and when you rock up to class, you are given a validation task, which basically makes you change the code to kind of prove that you know your code. And this week's one was you basically had a list of items in another script, and you had to do some tests in a different script to do certain things. So, for example, you had a test that had to make sure that the list wasn't adding duplicate items to the list. Now, the catch was that list was private. So you couldn't just go and in the block of code say, all right, list for each thing, check whether or not there's more than one. But the funny thing is, everyone in the class, that's what we were doing. I think when you're programming, it's either one of two things. Either the first idea is the best one, like Blake was saying, like sometimes you just got to do the way that you think is best, because that's probably the best way. But the other times is sometimes you just got to keep it simple. And so instead of going through, because it was called a test script. So basically it goes through and validates your own code to make sure it actually does what it's supposed to do. And so what I did was, instead of what everyone else was trying to do, which is go through the list and check each of them, I just thought in my head, okay, if this code works and I try to add a duplicate script, the number of the list shouldn't increase. And I had access to that. That was public to me. So in the script, instead of trying to get every item in the list and compare them, I just said, okay, if the list, here's the size of the script. If I try to add something that is the same as already in the list, the function that I've written should work. And so the list size shouldn't change. And if it does, then that's when we throw an error. And that was 2 lines of code, which basically get the list, try to add the new thing, and then whether or not, where everyone else is doing for loops and trying to because they have access to certain things that are private, and you overcomplicate it too much. And I was so proud of myself, because at first I was doing that whole for each thing, trying to get all the components, and then I sat back and was like, wait a minute, I don't need to do any of this. This is all busy work. And I felt so happy when I was like, oh, okay, we just do this. For me with programming, I think the best code is code you understand. If you're working in large-scale business and stuff, then you need to understand more things. But for Blake, I think the best code Blake can write is code Blake can understand. And if that is just doing if statements, like Toby Fox, who made Undertale, and as far as I'm aware, no one else has made a caliber of Undertale. Undertale is its own successful thing. You can make whatever you want, as long as you can read it and organize it. Because I think that's the most important thing. But I'm such a bad habit of I'll learn something new and then just use it all the time. I remember in Unity when I learned about how to do timers properly using enumerators, or enums or whatever they're called. Man, I use those bad boys every second script. I was like, we're not going to use the update function anymore. We're going to use this. And it was just not a good idea. But, I overused it. So yeah, I'm also guilty of that, of once I learn a new thing. But I think it's also a way of learning, right? Because then you use it in everything and you understand what use cases it's good in and what it's not good in, because you kind of figure that out. I think for me at least, like once I learn a new system, I'm like, this is my new superpower. Like I know how to like fix every problem now with this new thing. Um, but yeah, that's kind of how I go through it all.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it's very, I mean, it's important to sort of do the stuff that you understand, but there's always stuff. There's always going to be something out there that's going to make things easier. So like for like recently, well not recently, a while back, I sort of followed a tutorial on how to make some kind of like inventory system, and then that tutorial introduced me to data components.
Hmm.
Well, I could have just sort of brute force and just chucked, every tiny little thing in and done a bunch of checks and whatnot. I've got this now. I've got this data component in SourceSeeker where I use to check, just one single variable, and it'll spit out the rest of like sort of the, it's a costume. I've got a costume system going, right? And all I need is like a data, an item ID, and it does a whole bunch of things. But back then, all I do is I just like, I'll check if this is this, if this like, and like manually put in everything. I've got multiple vendors that can possibly sell the same item, and I want to like chuck sort of the same thing in all of them. And I sort of use this data component I learned, and now it's streamlined this entire sort of like vendor system. I can have multiple people selling the same thing without having to like manually put in those item values and things like that. But yeah, no, I do agree. I think at the end of the day, as long as the game works, it works, right?
I
100%.
think I think or since we're all giving examples of when we realized we were doing something incorrectly and then learned something new, I think the biggest thing for me was switching all my enemy AI code from if statements in the update function to using switch states, and I feel like that has been like. I mean, maybe that was like 5 or 6 years ago that I finally figured that out, but like that just made such a huge difference, and like so many like bugs in my enemies like AI code just went away once I figured that out, because I wasn't checking everything all of the time to like make sure like you're not meant to be patrolling, and you're not if it was basically like, have you seen the player? Yes or no. If you haven't seen the player, keep patrolling around. But now that's all, if you're not in the patrol state, you don't patrol. So doing that sort of stuff has like just it's made everything so much cleaner and simpler and easier to debug. And I think that's one of those things that for my first year of making games, like I just never came across anything like that. And once I really realized that it was becoming a problem and I started looking into what other solutions were out there, I stumbled upon something that has been extremely beneficial to my games.
It's tough because I feel like when you're in that state, it's not like you're not trying to learn or you're ignorant to learn. It's just you don't know that there's something else out there that actually can help. You don't know that there's actually something that is supposed to be used for this specific scenario. Because a lot of this stuff is like, yeah, once you know it, it's very obvious, but when you don't know it, it just doesn't exist, right? It's just not something that you really think would need something to be changed.
It's funny you mentioned this because I think I've had a recent epiphanies or like just things where I've gone like, what even is reality anymore when I think about it? Because I've been learning about all this programming stuff. And one thing that has blown my mind, right, was so with computers, they're made up of binary, which are ones and zeros. And that it's all math. Like someone back in the day invented math that could be represented with ones and zeros, and they've translated that into transistors that we can then use with light screens that then create computers. Like that concept in itself is insane to me. Like someone just didn't, people invented math. I think for me, that's the thing that's the most crazy. Like the one thing that I learned recently that I was just like, wow. Like, so Isaac Newton, right? Guy who discovered gravity or proved gravity or whatever else. He invented calculus because algebra wasn't a good enough mathematical framework for him to work in gravity. That's crazy to me. And I think there's been like computer scientists as well who have invented or gone through, past mathematicians' work to figure out how to build certain systems. I don't like me personally. I'm like, I don't think I could ever invent a new sort of math, or like I'm not that level of whatever. But I think the thing that also makes me just in awe of humanity is like, yes, we've already invented these systems, but like Andrew was saying, like sometimes we just don't know things because we don't know yet. Like maybe in 10, 15 years time, someone's going to invent a better way to optimize all of our computer systems because of the way that math works. That, now we have these supercomputers because we've just figured out a better way to use the transistors in them. Like stuff like that, where it's like maybe game engines are going to look even more perfectly photorealistic because someone just finds a better math for it. Again, this is me probably going off the deep end and being like, guys, have you heard this weird, crazy theory? But like, I think about it because, if statements and switch statements, like, I'm guessing, Blake, once you figured out what switch statements was, you're like, oh my gosh, it's like if, but like better. It's better than if. Like it's
Yeah, basically.
It makes it like I wait for the day where people come out with new math and then everyone's like, oh my gosh, like this, we can implement this into all our systems and everything gets even more productive. Because I don't know, that's just something that came into my head the other week, and then it's been sitting back there. And then once Blake said if statements and switch statements, I'm like, yeah, algebra and calculus, just invent new math, and then you'll be better at programming.
I mean, that's why I say, that's why I think the sort of like complacency of your own code sometimes can be dangerous, because, hey, you could be discovering the next, crazy thing, but you're just sort of like honed into your sort of way of doing things. You don't want to expand, because sometimes I do look at some. I'm sure I've looked at some stuff in like the material graph, and I'm like, oh, it looks scary. I don't want to touch it, and I just don't until I have to, and I think it could be so much better. But like I know for my job, my most recent job, I was like so scared to go into Unity's shader graph. I just was like sort of like, I'll like let the other artists handle it. But if I had just like sort of went into it from the very beginning, I could have just like, and I know shader graphs pretty decently well. I've like played with it, but like, for this job, I didn't want to screw up and stuff. But if I had just taken the deeper, taken a plunge, I think a lot of my stuff could be way better, or I could like optimize it for the system way better.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's already towards the end of it. I'm only like in the last couple of weeks starting to like touch shader graphs, and I was like, oh damn! If I just like sort of done this to begin with, I wouldn't have a lot of issues. Like I just was like, I was like manually putting animations on things that will spin rather than making it move on a texture, like scrolling texture. So I could have done that way ages ago, but I was too scared to, right? So I think sometimes there are things that like do work for you, but you need to take the extra step if you want to learn more and do improve your own stuff, right?
And sometimes, right, I think one thing that we don't do is actually compare the results. So one thing I think would be really interesting is, having that one object that moves on, that's transform or animates, and get the one that has the, shader material, and compare which one's more performant. Because I reckon some people would say, oh, the shader one, that one's going to be more performant, but maybe it's not. And then you, I think, have a better toolkit then to, have this evidence, and people say, oh, why are you animating it? Or why, you're doing all these if statements? It's like, well, because the other way isn't as efficient, or, not only is it more effort, it's actually less performant, stuff like that, where I think is also an interesting thing, which I haven't done a lot of, but I want to do more comparisons with, to see whether or not, is it really worth putting in all that effort, or is just the easier way actually like also more effective?
The scrolling texture was definitely easier, because I immediately moved that onto something else that hasn't been animated yet, and I just like checked it on. I was like, okay, well, if I just done this to begin with, this will not be an issue. Speaking of lots of learning, Nathan, you've been very busy with uni. I want to ask, are you starting to feel burnout? How's that for you?
I think I can definitely feel the edge of it. I think there's enough motivation and fire beneath me that I will make it through. but I think once it does finish and I can take a breath, I will probably collapse for like 2 weeks and just do absolutely nothing. Um, I think it's interesting, Burnout, because I mean, I guess we can all talk about this because Blake, I know you've had things with this as well. Burnout for me is, well, kind of two things. Because for me, there's like YouTube burnout when I make too many videos, and then stop making videos because I get burnt out from making videos. But then there's also the whole working in games and even work burnout, like working full time somewhere, being burnt out there. And I think a lot of it's to do with time management. I think I get the most burnt out when I do something for too long, and don't feel a return in it. So, for example, with videos, right? If I spend a whole week editing a video and I'm really proud of it, and I upload it and then nobody cares, and then I do that 3 or 4 more times, I get burnt out because I'm almost sacrificing time and energy that would be spent on other things, and then I don't end up feeling a return on that. And it's the same with games, right? Um, the amount of times in my life I've spent up late in the morning, 3 a.m., and then 2 months later, I'm still doing it, and I'm just like, when is this going to get finished? Is this ever going to get finished? And it comes to a point where it's like I'm burnt out because, yeah, the too much of my energy is spent without like, I don't want to say a return, but like this, it's almost like an imbalance in my life. Yeah, so right now I'm okay, but there's definitely times in the past where I've been like, whew, Nathan, you are doing too much. Because I think, I don't know, Blake, what's your opinion?
Yeah, so right now I am extremely tired. And you guys can probably tell right now I'm a bit like maybe the things I'm talking about don't exactly line up with the main conversation on this podcast. But
That's
you guys
all
will
of
just
us.
have to forgive me for that. But at the moment, I'm not feeling burnout at all, which is good because I've felt very extreme burnout in the past. At the moment, I do have a full-time job that's not game dev related at all. In fact, it's basically the exact opposite. So basically, I do that during the day, and I come home and I work on my game until 1 in the morning, a few nights a week at least. And that is very unhealthy to be getting as little sleep as I am, but I'm making a lot of progress, and I'm not feeling burnout because I feel like the game dev is broken up with other parts of my life. But if I go back to, I guess it really started in 2020 when I went full time making games. I think I was like pretty good for about 3 to 4 months of just, at the time I was, how old was I? 21. I was single and I didn't really have any responsibilities or anything much else going on in my life. So I was just working 7 days a week, and basically all I did was sit on my computer working on games, and a lot of good came out of that. Like I made sleigh bells in that time, and that's still basically my claim to fame at this point. But pretty quickly that became noticeably unsustainable. But I kept doing it for another 2 years after that, and I burnt myself the hell out so extremely bad, especially because I wasn't I kind of stopped releasing games for a while. I had like quite a long period where I was working all the time, and this is a problem I still have where I was swapping projects and I was just working and just really not having anything to show for it. And when you combine that with, working 7 days a week and not really taking any breaks, I didn't get into the best mental state for quite a while. And I definitely went through periods where I'm like, nah, I'm done making games. I'm not doing this anymore. And then 2 hours later, I open Unity again, and the cycle just would repeat. But after quite a while, it was about two and a half years, I reckon, I was doing game dev full time. I went back to my old job, and it's one of those like really hard things where it's like I want to be making games, all the time. But I feel like if I was doing it full time at the moment, I would definitely be keeping it to like a 9 to 5. Because if, going back to just working 7 days a week, I don't know how long my days were, but basically all I did was go for a walk a couple of times a day, and the rest of the time I was sitting on the computer. Super unhealthy. But I feel like, yeah, if you are doing game dev full time, I reckon you really have to be strict with it and keep it to a 9 to 5. Otherwise, you're just gonna burn yourself out, and you're not gonna really like see the return on the investment of the time you're putting in after a certain point. I think I remember hearing John Carmack talk about like he could program for a certain period of time, but then after that he had to stop because like your progress would just like fall off a cliff basically. So yeah, I think there is a point where the amount of time you're putting in doesn't necessarily equate to quality work on the other end. But yeah, that's basically my little spiel on burnout. It's not good. I don't recommend burnout. But yeah, I feel like it's really just finding things that break it up, because you can't, like you said, Nathan, you can't be doing one thing all of the time. It's not good for you, and it's not sustainable in the long run.
So do you think? Okay, so basically based on what we're discussing here, like, do you guys think burnout is like a loss of motivation? Because you're spending a lot of time working on this new game, and you're very motivated to get this finished. Not even get it finished, but like to sort of make it as good as possible. And you're spending a lot of time, and I would imagine not as much time as you used to, but it's still like an overwhelming amount of time, right, for you. But you still have this very strong motivation to get this finished, so you're not really feeling burnout at all. I would say like I normally have a very strong motivation to finish games and to make games as looking as good as possible, to make them as fun as possible. So I'll spend a lot of time, a lot of time on something, and the motivation will be there to finish it. Like I think Soul Seeker, I think I got burnt out initially is because I felt that doing it as because I was in an old team, that 3-man team wasn't working for me, and I was not seeing the future as this 3-man team with the project. Whereas I'm seeing the future of this project much more clearly as like something that's not going to really even be finished, but I still have a lot of motivation to work on it because I feel like I feel a lot more positive about sort of the future, right? Even if it's not going to be a bright future for this project, I still feel like I want to keep working at it because I have this positive feeling about it. What do you guys think? Do you guys think it's more of like a motivation thing, or it really is does you guys think that burnout will eventually catch up with anyone who doesn't take care of themselves or spends too much time on something?
I think that definitely like we said, motivation plays a role in burnout. For me, in my experience, I can be unmotivated in something, but if I like have diligence and go in and work on it, I can still get stuff done. For me, I think burnout is actually the combination of being unmotivated but also being fatigued. Whether it's doing the same thing and just not seeing it, and you're wearing down on it, or the fact you're not getting enough sleep or taking care of yourself. Like I think burnout is definitely that unmotivation, that fatigue, and almost your whole being realizing that it's imbalanced. Sometimes it's the fact that you're like disinterested in the project and you're like, okay, now I don't want to work on this anymore. But it's probably also the combination of the fact that like you said, you can't see a vision for it, and you're probably just fatigued with the idea of even working on it. Like I know, it's funny, like when I think of game jams and stuff, I'm never fatigued at game jams. I'm never burnt out on game jams. Like even if I'm very tired, that motivation has kept me going. And if anything, the next week I want to work on my own stuff even more. But yeah, I think definitely for me as well, like if I don't get enough sleep, or if I just feel like I'm not making progress, that's when the burnout really affects me. And it's yeah, it's like it's not only that I don't want to work on the thing, I'm not motivated, but I don't want to do anything. Like the the burnout affects not just the project, but it affects my entire life. And I think that's the thing that is kind of the difference between being like not wanting to work in your thing and being burnt out. Because I think, yeah, it will affect how your entire schedule is affected.
Yeah, I think burnout is very different for everyone. It's hard for me to get fatigue of something. I'm the type of person who can run at the wall over and over again and just never give up. Uh,
That's because you're young, Andrew. Wait till you reach your
uh,
late 20s, and then you'll realize,
okay,
oh,
okay, yeah, yeah. You know, yeah, but I've always had this very, I don't know, I would say like sort of I like repetitiveness. I've listened to the same song for hundreds of hours for absolutely no reason. Um, so for me, I think burnout is more correlated towards motivation because I've had many times where I'd love to keep working on something, but you know, if my motivation, like if the sights of the future is not lining up with me, I'm feeling unmotivated to work on something. I don't think I've really ever felt burnout or like that sort of heavy sense of like I cannot work anymore. Like I've always had sort of some vigor. I have had some vigor in terms of what I do, but for me, burnout really only happens when you know I feel like there's grass is greener on a different side, right? So I'll move on.
I think for me, burnout has often come from not seeing the results that I want as well in a project, and I feel like that's probably why I have like jumped project so many times in the past. And I mean, I feel like it's different for everybody, but I feel like burnout is something that is probably going to catch up with everyone eventually if you are just continually doing the same thing. Um, I used to watch Casey Neistat like way back in the day, and for anyone who doesn't know who that is, he used to do daily vlogs on YouTube. Not sure what years that was, but I think he stopped around like 2018, 2019. But I think for over 3 years, he did a vlog every single day. And I remember in an interview he did, when he started doing that, someone said to him, like, be careful not to burn yourself out. And he said he remembers thinking that, you know, I'm too motivated to get burnt out. Like that can't happen to me. And then, you know, 3 years down the track, he eventually had to stop doing it because it gets to a point where, you know, your brain just can't focus on the same thing over and over again for, you know, years at a time, without any breaks, especially doing something like that where like your entire life begins to revolve around what you're creating. Um, but I think, yeah, I guess it varies for people, but for me, it's really a combination of overwork and not seeing the results that you want.
I mean, also, yeah, I do agree with what you said earlier. You know, it's really helping you out with burnout that like you have a lot of things, not just games in your life right now. You know, you've got a lot of things that even though a big part of your life is still games, you've got a partner that you care a lot about, and you've got a lot of like new sort of like ambitions that you want to go through as well. So you know, I think it is important, you know, that like have things outside of what you're doing currently. It should help out with burnout, right? But sometimes,
100%.
you know,
Mm.
not everyone can sort of take the time off. Like Nathan, he needs to be working all the time. Uh, but we wish you luck on uni.
How do they do this? That's yeah. It's sort of the biggest review as well. When unis ask me like, "How was this course?" I'm like, "Great." If it was the only one I was doing, like that's just the thing that happens in school. Like I remember in high school as well. Um, And the math teacher would always give us so much homework, and the English teacher would just like everyone just gives so much homework, and would be like, guys, like, slow down, slow down. Um, yeah, because and it's funny because people always say, take care of yourself, go out for dinner with friends, go for a walk, make sure you're okay mentally. But then they'll just give you all these tasks and roles and responsibilities and KPIs, and they're like, what's that? You're not getting any younger, got to get all the stuff done before, you reach 30 so you can be in Forbes 30 under 30, all that sort of stuff where you're just like, whoa, boy. Because, yeah, and for some people, right, like I think of those who maybe doing this to survive, like people who aren't just making games, but those who maybe are working and feel burnt out at their dead-end jobs. Like, they have no choice but to power through that. And for those people, like, man, I salute you. Like, what you're doing is probably one of the most incredible things you can do. Because it's a privilege to be able to take a break from your burnout and, decompress from it. Not everyone in the world can actually experience that. And I'm sure there are some people in other countries who experience burnout but have never heard of the concept and don't, like, they just think that that's what working is. Because, yeah, like that's, I think the scary part too is that, like, there's burnout in the world where it's like there's no other choice but to keep going. At least with games, when it's a hobby and a passion, there's usually another choice. Or you can take a break, like we don't need to make games to breathe and eat, more or less. But yeah, for those who like actually need to do these things to live, and you get burnt out, like that's the roughest. That's terrible. But yeah, I mean, for me and with university, like I definitely, there's just, I have my motivators too, right? Like I have those things that when I'm feeling tired and unmotivated, I just think about that stuff, and I kind of don't let myself fall below like what my standard would be of working. Like I'll have a full day, absolute full day of just lectures and study and travel, and it's 6:30 at night, and all I want to do is just eat some cheeseburger and go to sleep and roll over and watch TikTok or whatever. But I have a compulsory lecture. I have to watch and listen to people connect and disconnect with bad audio connections and ask dumb questions they should have known by week one. But I have to be in attendance, otherwise I lose percentage in my mark. And it's like, okay, well, I don't want that. And when you think that's so stupid, then I just remind myself of like why I'm doing it. I think once you know why you're doing something, then you can power through that burnout and understand and almost plan around it. Like with me in university, like I just think of my motivating factors, and then that gets me through it. Where, at least with me with games, I'm motivated to make games, but sometimes certain projects, I lose the sight of the motivating factor of why I'm making it. And then I get burnt out. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
And I think part of the reason that I haven't experienced burnout in the last probably, I don't know, maybe 12 months, despite probably working more and harder than I have maybe ever done in the past, because it's, I think the amount of hours I put into the game every week is probably not that far off of a full-time job. Except, I'm doing that after I finish my full-time job. But I feel like the main difference is that I now have other plans for things I want to do in my life. Things that my partner and I want to, be able to achieve in the next couple of years, hopefully. And I feel like that is just pushing me to go so hard at this, and I'm just not experiencing that burnout. Like I feel like back when I was younger and I was doing the games full time, I was working a lot, but there wasn't really that driving force. Like I wanted to be successful and I wanted to, make money, but I always knew I had these things to fall back on. Like if it doesn't work out, I can just go back to my old job and things like that. Everything will be fine. I think I remember reading Arnold Schwarzenegger's book like years ago, and he was saying how he basically just had no backup plan. And he just, like the bodybuilding to begin with, and then the acting, he just got to a point where it had to work out for him because, you know, there was nothing else to fall back on. And I feel like, yeah, I'm not saying it's healthy or something that you should do, but having something else that, you know, is a real driving factor, is, at least for me, is definitely helping prevent, yeah, burning myself out. I mean, I may
It's
crash at some point,
yeah.
and I just like I'm just done with everything, and I can't work anymore. But I haven't hit that just yet, and I hope I don't. But we'll see if I can manage to, you know, get some success from my games before that happens.
I mean, that's why it's important for the community to support each other, right? For you to have friends in this community, for you have friends in like outside this community and people to support you and make sure that you know you're healthy along the way. Because at the end of the day, you know, if you're working on something alone, it's really hard to you know fight against the demons in your head.
Yeah, well, just before this podcast, me and Andrew were talking, and he said that we're going to get to a certain time each night that if I'm still in the call with them, he's going to start kicking me out to like make me go to bed and get some sleep.
It's so true though. The other night, my wife and I were both like, okay, we'll do this one little thing like on both our ends, and then we'll get ready for bed. And then hours pass, and we both look at the time, and we both go, "Oh no! Last time I looked up, it was 10, and now it's 12:30. What happened?" And so now, and I haven't done it yet, but I had the thought today. I was like, okay, next time I say this to myself, I'm setting an alarm, and once the alarm goes off, the rule is you just get up and you have to go be an adult, brush your teeth, go to bed. Because like, man, that's the thing I'm learning now, just like going to bed on time and waking up on time. The two hardest things, and making the bed and just doing stuff like that, where it's like, okay. But like you're saying, Blake, like I feel like the more responsibilities I have in my life, the more work I'm able to do. Like a few years ago, if I was doing what I'm doing now, I would have dropped out. I would have dropped out last semester. I wouldn't have made it this far already. I would have just given up because it was too hard. But now it's like, no, like I somehow am powering through it and working like 24/7, studying, reviewing, editing videos, doing all of this stuff somehow magically. And I don't have any explanation as to how I have this extra energy, because I feel like I have less energy in my life now, yet I'm somehow able to do more because of those responsibilities that I have as I
think
age up.
you and I are both in very similar boats. And I think like statistically, as like men with families and children and a wife are like, they make more money and their businesses are more successful. Like you would think the people with the most money would be, you know, the single dudes with the sports cars and, you know, that sort of stuff. But no, it's the people that, you know, once you have a family and things like that, you have to make money to support them and all that sort of stuff. And I think that just, you know, it's a very good driving factor for a lot of people.
Yeah. And it's like, I think of even just people who like, you know, dads who work two jobs. Like I remember seeing, I think it was an Undercover Boss or something, like a dad who worked at a hotel and he worked two jobs. He would work nearly 24 hours a day. Like he'd do his day job at the hotel where this Undercover Boss, you know, owned the business, and then he'd finish his work and do a night shift at like a petrol station or something to pay for his daughter's tuition for college. And, you know, if you asked 21-year-old Nathan to get up at like 9 a.m., I'd be like, oh, no, I don't want to. But now it's like I'm on campus at school by 9:30 in the morning. My first class is until 12:30, and I'm just like I take the day by the balls and just grab them and say, okay, I'm gonna show what I'm made of. It's I think it's actually, and I'm sorry, maybe Andrew, you experienced this or you already have experienced it, but when you start living for somebody else, I think that is the most powerful thing. Like living for yourself is fun, it's great and all, and I did enjoy it in the past. But I think once you have someone else who you almost appreciate and care for more than yourself, then that is so much more powerful. And like that's where we find this, like you get an extra inner strength that you see in the movies and all this stuff. Like you actually feel it in reality, like it's real. Yeah,
Hang on 1 second.
that's all good.
It's like a mother's being able to lift a car off of their baby, like that sort of stuff. Like,
I was thinking the same thing as well. It's like, yeah, like the parents and stuff have those superpowers, but I think it just happens with people as well. Once you have someone else to fight for, then like your health bar and strength just like grows as well, because you're like, all right, let's do this.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's. Is that what we're saying? To fight burnout, go get into a relationship that's serious or gain more responsibilities? No,
Yeah.
don't do that, because that's not how it works. You fall into that, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it's also an extra thing of like, it's a crazy thing to experience, and I think that just happens with life and with age. It'd be funny to look back in this in 30, 40 years, and we're like, bro didn't even know what it was like. Like, talking about all this stuff, doesn't even have kids yet, and just do wait till he has. Yeah. So, I mean, any other thoughts?
That's a very interesting topic we talked about today. Burnout, but I guess get a wife is the solution, right? So yeah.
I mean, Andrew, you don't need it because you don't get burnt out anyways. You're
No.
yeah, you're good.
I'll stay. I'll try to stay in my 20s forever, and then I got it. Well, is that about all the time we got? Thank you everyone for watching. This is episode 7 of Playtest podcast. Remember to subscribe and like and leave a comment of what we should talk about next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Good job, Andrew. Good job.
We can redo that if you want.
Do you want to redo it?
You can redo that one.
If I can. Oh, you want me to redo it? Nah.
If you want me to redo, if you want to redo it,
nah.
there's
Do
anything else I'm
some
missing.
thumbnail faces for me, because you didn't send me through any.
Oh yeah,
I
shit.
didn't.
Sorry.
Oh, I didn't either. Okay, sorry.
Oh.
Sorry. I mean,
What's the fake Mr. Beast one?
yeah. Well, there's creepy ones now where like they do one with his teeth and without his teeth. Yeah, that's a perfect one right there, Andrew. That's a.
You guys seen the Rizzler? That kid. He's like.
Include that in. Include that in. Is that a blooper? Include that as a blooper.